The whole premise of my talk is that it's not the first responders who are unfit for duty. It's civilian psychology that's unfit for duty. And civilian psychology is what has been advanced for many years, migrated into public safety, and it isn't what first responders need. It doesn't match the culture, value, and ethos of first responders. Those civilian approaches are not working and they won't work. And so let's kind of pause and break from these false beliefs and wrong approaches so that we can build what protectors and defenders really need.
Because what is insanity? Are you struggling with trauma, mental issues, maybe relationship issues? Well, today on The Asset Mindset, we have an amazing guest, Doc Springer. She's here, part of the podcast, to share her experiences, her stories, and her insights on how to deal with trauma or other mental health issues. Doc Springer, why don't you say hello to the audience?
Thank you, Daniel. Hello to everyone who's tuning in today. I'm happy to be here and just learned that Daniel was with the teams and just happy to be here talking to you as somebody who has long supported people with a warrior spirit.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Yes, and I'm your host, Daniel Fielding of The Asset Mindset. And I believe Doc Springer is helping people establish their own asset mindset and help them get back on the right track is what we're trying to do here. So talk to us a little bit about your work and your mindset and how you got involved.
Sure. I mean, we can take this conversation in any number of directions, Daniel, that you're interested in. My first book was really a collaboration with Jason Roncaroni. It was a 400-page book on military transition about the things that people don't talk about, that they should talk about, in terms of the identity pieces of transitioning and how often people who serve in the military feel like they've lost that sense of purpose and that family that includes many people you take a bullet for. And so there's this kind of emotional amputation and this period, a bit of walking a wasteland, and your mindset is so critical to reforging a tribe, to repurposing the warrior spirit within yourself. When I write for warriors, I don't write from a position of, reaching down and pulling them up. I reach next to me and maybe walk with them, or maybe just even half a step behind, because I really believe in putting people in the driver's seat in terms of their own growth, their own healing. And so some of my work is around military transition, and then my work has taken me deep into the trenches of mental warfare. And even there, in the darkest places where sometimes, dark and self-destructive thoughts are pretty common for people, because part of answering the call is navigating mental warfare. It's not unusual. It's not pathological. It's just part of answering the call. And so a lot of my work is around the premise that we really need to better prepare warriors for the mental warfare that comes with walking the warrior's path, which we're not doing right now, and helping them to have the right mindset when, not if, they encounter mental warfare, so that they know they're not broken, so that they know that with the right insights and the right support, they can heal.
Now, you're talking a lot about preparation for this. Military loves to prepare. What are some techniques that people could prepare themselves for if they are stepping into this role, or maybe a role that is in the civilian world, like a police officer or paramedic?
Sure. So I like to talk about it as, it's really simple, actually. Let's say you're a police officer and you see messed up things. You can't see messed up things and not have some messed up thoughts. It just comes with the territory. So we shouldn't be shocked, when some dark and self-destructive thoughts come. Often those thoughts are actually not what we perhaps wish to do in reality, but they are manifestations of our mind kind of working through our worst fears. So guys will tell me, for example, like they had a terrible intrusive thought of hurting someone they love. And it's not that they want to do that. It's a manifestation of their worst fear, that their warrior spirit would turn against somebody they love. So those thoughts, even those thoughts that people get really ashamed about, are actually really common. And one of the ways that I've kind of worked to explain this is that in medical school, in second year medical school, there's a phenomenon called second year medical school phenomenon. Have you heard of that, Daniel?
No, I have not.
Okay. So before, yeah, it's basically when you get this huge tome full of diagnoses and diseases that you've never heard of. So this is all the stuff that could go wrong with you because you forgot to bring a pair of sandals and you stepped on some mud and a worm inserted itself in the sole of your foot, right? In some tropical, right? Or you got bitten by a chigger that was infected or a Vinchuca beetle and it gave you Chagas disease. I actually looked into Chagas disease because it's how Charles Darwin died. It's fascinating. You get bitten by this beetle called the Vinchuca beetle, and then this disease goes into latency for like 10 years, and then you die of neurological symptoms. And they went back in his journal and found out that he described this beetle. He described the red welts that's characteristic of the Vinchuca beetle's bite, and then he died of neurological symptoms 10 years later. So my point is that when these things happen and you read about them in medical school, you start to think you have some of these symptoms. People start to feel like maybe they have these rare tropical diseases they couldn't possibly have because they've never been to that place and never been, had their foot out where a hookworm could, insert. So if you see a lot of suicide, which police officers do, which firefighters do, which EMS do. They're right in there. They see attempted suicide, completed suicide. They lose people that they are family to, their brothers and sisters in arms, their fellow like firefighters. They lose people that sometimes they didn't see it coming. And they are often suicide loss survivors, even though they don't label themselves as such. So all of that means that you're going to have some occasional dark and self-destructive thoughts from the mere exposure to all of that. And it's not about wanting to take yourself out. The point is that if you go dark with those thoughts and go into hiding and like don't talk about it with somebody who can help you understand and navigate that mental warfare, you will increase your risk substantially. So some of my work sits in that place of really helping people develop those insights and navigate those dark places that come with part of this calling.
Wow. So what's a way you would handle these dark thoughts for
Well,
a
I mean, the
client?
first the first instinct that many people with a warrior spirit have is to lock it down, shut it in the vault, and just isolate and feel ashamed for even having the thought. And casting into their mind all these hypothetical conversations about what would happen if I acknowledged that I had this thought. And would I be seen as, mentally unwell? But a lot of people have these thoughts. I mean, commonly, warriors acknowledge these thoughts to me. I hear them all the time from people because they trust me and they know that, it's just not shocking to me. So if they could all talk to each other, they would know how common these thoughts are, right? So I decided, okay, let's do this experiment. So I was with a group of warfighters in this warfighter reunion, off the grid, private place. And I said to them, here's a note card. I'm not going to have you write your name on it. I want you to write down, though, what the voice of your demons, using their words, not like demon possession, but the voice of despair, right? The voice of despair says to you when you're at the end of that tunnel. Just write it down. I didn't mean to give you a knife hand. So they wrote down what the voice of their demons was saying to them. And then I collected the cards and read them to all of them with nobody's names identified. And they were shocked to discover that there were some very common themes
Hmm.
in what they had written. They happened to be all men. Many of them were fathers. One of the themes was, um, your wife, your kid, they would never think of you the same if they knew the kinds of things you've done or the kinds of things you've thought about.
Hmm.
You should be taken to a deserted island because you are the problem. You're the monster. You're the liability. You're the threat to your family's future well being or safety. And because this mental warfare is actually predictable. So I read the Marine Rifle Squad manual, which is not a vacation read. It's very thick and it's about all the tactics that warriors use, Marines use in this case, and translated that into a tactical analysis of mental warfare. So I had been kind of giving them this presentation. And when you explained it in that terminology, that the campaigns of the enemy are predictable, then you can prepare for them. And if you know that the voice of despair is going to come at you with a few of these messages, then you can prepare for it. And you can have a tribe in place, people you trust that you can take your emotional armor off with, who will not think of you differently, who will be brave enough to say, oh, yeah, I've had that thought too, or I've something similar, right?
Mhm.
Find those people in your life, and that dissolves the shame and reduces the power of that kind of mental warfare. So I wrote about this extensively in my book Warrior. And then again, in the book I released today, Fallout, really double tap that as a way to kind of change the way we think about preventing suicide and supporting warrior wellness.
I love it. Now, you've mentioned tribe twice now. Earlier, about people being in the military, having that tribe, and you just brought it up again. Can
Yeah.
you go into the importance of a tribe and how
Yeah.
important it is if you lose your tribe to try and find a new one?
Yeah. I mean, first, I want to credit my friend. And he's been a wonderful support to me when I was bringing out Warrior. Sebastian Junger wrote Tribe, which is a book many people have read. I recommend it all the time when I give talks. It's on homecoming and belonging. It's a short, powerful book that Sebastian Junger wrote. So I read that. And I had already been doing work around tribe even as I was thinking through his work. And, he defines tribe as the people that you would give the last of your food to. If you're running out of food, this is who you would share the last of your food with. I like that definition. But in my work as a doc, I've added a dimension to tribe. And so my definition of tribe is it's somebody that you would take your emotional armor off with and really speak the truth with courage. Courage meaning share what is in your heart here, which is a different thing than bravery. A lot of people are very brave, but also not courageous when it comes to talking about what's in their spirit, what's in their mental landscape. And so I work with warriors to be that first person they often will can kind of crack open to, and then help them to be able to build that tribe and do it with each other so they're not dependent on me. I don't believe in fostering dependency. Um, so I think for some warriors, I say for many warriors, it's actually probably harder to do that, to drop your emotional armor than to share the last of your food or go into a firefight. And so that's why I think that different definition is important when we're talking about overcoming mental warfare.
Yeah, I gotta say that resonated with me hard. I heard the food, share last of food. Oh, I know how many people I would do that with. Taking that emotional armor off, my tribe just shrank quite a bit. I'm gonna
Yeah.
be honest. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that's something to have that safety and be able to do that. That tribe is definitely smaller for me. I can't speak for
Yeah.
everybody else, but you're right on there. Like I'll give the shirt off my back and the food, no problem. I wouldn't say no problem. I'm not going to do that for just anybody, but a lot of people
Yeah.
compared to opening up and really sharing, struggles and different things. Because we all have struggles, no matter who we are.
Yep. Yep. We all do. And so, in my book Warrior, I wrote about this around a warrior that I was working with who said, I would rather go into the kill zone in a firefight than tell my wife that I love her and I need her. And I was like, yes, okay. And you still need to do that or you'll lose her. So my role was to help him to have the ability and process and the courage to do what he needed to do. And he saved his marriage. And he's one of many. I pulled him out. So Warrior is kind of like one of the actually the veterans in my network that read my next book that came out today, Fallout. He caught this. Warrior is the first in a triad of books I'm writing. So, Warrior, How to Support Those Who Protect Us, is all about what trust looks like, the difference between doctors and docs. How do you build trust? People that have a warrior spirit. And I talk about a tactical analysis of mental warfare. And I talk about shame and moral injury and survivor guilt and grief and loss and relationships and these different topics in that book. This book, Fallout: 10 Common Beliefs That Kill Our Bravest and the Truths That Save Them, is kind of like The Empire Strikes Back. Like, that was A New Hope. This is like The Empire Strikes Back, where I have to go a little dark because I find myself hitting a wall around getting notifications of people that are dying by suicide in the police, firefighter communities, EMS community, and of course, the warfighter community that I care about, who have become like extended family to me. It's personal to me. And I'm weary of getting, it doesn't matter if I know them, just seeing that another police officer took his life doesn't sit with me when we could be doing so much better and so much differently. And what I found is that this thinking, these false beliefs have so infiltrated themselves into our common thinking about warrior wellness and suicide prevention that we've been taken way off the path in the wrong direction for decades around what works. Spending a lot of money, people investing a lot of time, a lot of smart people talking about solutions that are great for civilians, but they don't work for people with a warrior spirit. And that's the people I know and support. And so I'm the voice of what they have told me they need and what will work for them. That's what this book is about.
Fantastic. I love that. Let's talk about false beliefs now. You just brought that up.
Just anything about it, or
Yeah, pretty much. Just you mentioned false beliefs, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to go into that. Like, what are
sure.
some of the false beliefs that people have that they're fighting or struggling with?
Yeah. I mean, I think at some level, people in the first responder and warrior communities at a gut level will hopefully recognize what I'm saying, because so many of them have sat through mandatory suicide prevention trainings or seen these initiatives come out, and in their gut level have had this split where they've said, this wouldn't work for me. It's not something I would do. It's not something that would work for my unit. Um, but let's take an example, just be concrete about it. So chapter 1 of the book is about suicide prevention awareness campaigns. Now, millions of dollars have been pumped into these awareness campaigns. We've seen them go around through social media, and some of them are really fancy with glossy assets and celebrity, guests, and people just constantly talking about how many we're losing, need to be more aware. And that actually often increases risk for the warrior and first responder communities. What I know as a trusted doc is that I'm told repeatedly that that makes people feel like it's a runaway train that can't be stopped,
Hmm.
that suicide is a problem that's an epidemic and no one can get traction with it. It makes people feel helpless, which is increasing risk for those who are at risk. It makes their burden of grief so much stronger to be constantly reminded. And people also say, that feels more like for the people that are not in the arena, those campaigns. So they say a lot of things to me privately. And I've just watched this split play out in the public domain versus what I'm hearing from warriors and first responders. And at a certain point, it just came to a decision for me to be brave and speak this truth. And hopefully, warriors will have my back because they got to make it count. I can't summon my courage like this and then do it on my own. That's not how it works. I need the warriors in my life, people like yourself, people like Denny, to stand in support of what you've been telling me you need.
I think one of the false beliefs that I've run across and people that I talk to or work with is that they feel alone. Everybody tends to feel alone, especially in the warrior community where
Uh-huh.
I come from. People
Yeah.
think they look left, they look right, they see these amazing men, these
Yeah.
studs, these people that are doing great things, accomplishing incredible tasks, are in good shape, take care of themselves. It's like, man, they got it all together. They got it
They're
all
squared
together.
away,
And
right?
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And you're like, man, I'm kind of jacked up in the head. I got to keep
Yeah.
quiet, or they feel alone. And
Everyone's jacked up at
you're
some point.
yes, exactly, but
Mhm.
your experiment showed that that's a
Yeah.
false belief, you're not alone. How many people
That's
had the same type of things written on those note cards?
this yeah. And I've done this not just the one time with that group of warfighters, but with so many groups. Absolutely. People are professionally good at compartmentalizing their private pain, and they protect that pain as though their identity depends on it because they feel it does. So their place in the tribe is what they're protecting. They don't want to be seen as not as trustworthy, not as reliable, struggling in a way that nobody else is. In the tribe, membership is about, holding the shields together, the phalanx together with equal
Mm,
strength. And the biggest myth there is that people aren't struggling because they look strong and they're operational, right? So I like to share that, you know, resilience is the wrong target, in my opinion. That's one of the chapters in my book, and I explain why in detail, but we're all resilient until we're not. And the resilience of warriors is their Achilles heel because they're so operational, even when they're privately dying inside, that they get a crisis and then everything falls apart. They lose their marriage, they lose custody of their kids, they have legal consequences, substance addiction, and all this stuff is able to grow in private for so long because they're so resilient and so good at professionally compartmentalizing their hidden pain. And they think they're alone and nobody else will identify and they will lose their tribe. And that is absolutely a false belief.
yeah, that's spot on. Absolutely. I've seen it in our community. People just they hold it together, hold it together, hold it together, and you can only go so long before something does break. You talk about the shield and holding the shield. Behind that shield, it looks good from the outside, but behind it, they could be shaking and their muscles are fatigued and whatever. Like you can only hold it up for so long.
Yeah.
And that's where you need to lean on your tribe and reach out to people that can help and that are going to be supportive. So, how long do you find it takes for someone from when they reach out to start seeing improvement?
Well, very quickly. If you have the right insights and the right support, if you talk to a doc that gets it, I'm not the only one. I mean, I've met other docs on the road. Some of them are embedded, and some I've just met in police departments or just throughout, this journey. But there aren't very many of us. So one of the things I'm building is really building consultation and advising with command staff leaders in public safety, with progressive sheriffs and chiefs in fire and police, so that I can scale these insights. And maybe some of them will have me go in and meet with all their command staff and kind of set the culture and consult with them on an ongoing basis, be that safe person and advisor to the generals, if you will, which is a role I'm very comfortable with. And the other, thing I often do is go in and resource peer teams. So they have these peer support teams, which are very powerful, but often left to kind of run independently without consultation and support from someone like me. And so sometimes they'll have me work with their peer teams. So I think if you have the right insights to answer your question and you have the right treatment, sometimes it takes biological treatment as well to correct biological injuries. I don't see PTSD as a disorder and a life sentence that you have to live with forever. I think if you have the right treatments, you can heal. And we can use precision medicine treatments, stuff you've probably heard of being in special forces. The stellate ganglion block is one of them. It's not the only one, but it's really powerful. And it can arrest that spiral of somebody feeling broken. Because if we can do like a 15, 20-minute procedure and you feel totally different and you feel calm and control restored to your body, then it can pull you out of a suicidal tailspin. Other things are very good too. The ketamine infusions and nasal Spravato very good with suicidal ideations. Even just a single dose has pulled many of my patients out of that dark, self destructive mind state. And then you do some work with a doc that gets it, or with somebody who's been trained by, with the right insights, you can get better very quickly. I would say that I've not seen a lot of patients because a lot of what I do is kind of senior advising and other things, but I've kept up with a few patients. Until recently. I was seeing, 3 to 6 patients a week, something like that. And most of them are much better within 4 to 6 sessions. When we combine biological treatment with insight building sessions, they really do tend to heal very quickly. So it doesn't have to be this years long process for many people, is my point.
I love it, and that's what I was trying to get to. For people out there, whatever you're dealing with or struggling with, you can change the
Yep.
direction and your trajectory of where you're going and how you think and reframing your mind. You can do it a lot faster than you realize if you
Yep.
start the movement and motion in that direction. Now, speaking of movement, that just triggered a thought in my mind, EMDR, the eye movement technique and that. Can you talk about that and share
Sure.
that with us?
Sure. When it first came out, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is what EMDR stands for those listeners unfamiliar. I got trained by a retired colonel. I was the only person in the VA at the time when I, started my career. I spent 8 years as a frontline psychologist in a very busy VA with hundreds of patients over those years. And got trained in EMDR because my patient said, "This is really powerful. You should get trained." And I was like, "I don't hypnotize people. No, thanks. It's not what I'm about." And so when, people were showing me this eye movement thing, I had a misperception of it at first. And so enough of the warriors on my caseload said, "You really should be open minded, doc, and you should go check this out." So I got trained by EC Hurley. He's a retired colonel, and I was the only person in the VA for a while doing the EMDR with patients. I found it to be very effective as far as the trauma informed talk therapies go. I think it's on the more trauma informed end. So let me help with that kind of like, let me give a little context for that, Daniel. So there's a difference between trauma focused and trauma informed treatment. And the difference is this, which many people miss. Trauma focused is treatment that says your trauma is central to where you're stuck, and focusing on your trauma is how we get you well. So, trauma focused treatment is what many large systems of healthcare and the DoD and the VA have been focused on. And I got trained in those things, went through the whole thing and sent tapes in, and I'm certified. And prolonged exposure is the one that, really, or cognitive processing therapy. These are both exposure based therapies where people either repeatedly talk about their trauma in detail, maybe they record it and listen to themselves talk about it over and over, or they write about it in a trauma impact statement, and they're exposing themselves until they habituate to the trauma. There are some people for whom those approaches are helpful. And so I don't want to say that it's not helpful for anyone because I don't believe there's one right treatment for everybody. Like the kind of profile that would be maybe a good treatment for person to use with that is somebody who really is like, I'm ready to rip the band-aid off. Like, let's just do it. I want to do it in a kind of blunt force, kind of, you know, sort of what's the word? Taekwondo, like no Wing Chun for me. Like, let's just like punches and kicks. Let's go. However, I have stopped using those treatments personally, and I have been a public um, advocate for shifting to treatments that are more trauma informed. Trauma informed treatments are treatments that, as you work to heal somebody, have a goal of not creating further trauma. So you're really actively working to avoid re traumatization. And I've had enough people with the gold standard treatments who have been re traumatized
Mhm.
that I don't use those treatments anymore because I've learned that there are better, more effective methods that don't involve me having to ask someone to talk about every single detail of the day their friend blew up or they got raped or whatever it is, that are trauma informed. And as a doc and a healer, that sits much better with me and that feels right to me. So I've been kind of a public critic of shifting away from trauma focused and creating a new gold standard around let's treat the biological system that's injured so that people are in the right mind state and they have calm and control in their bodies before you even start therapy. Let's not use these treatments as last resort. Let's do it first. Primer before the paint. So if you get people back calm and control in their bodies and they're sleeping well and they feel hopeful because they feel much better from a 15-minute procedure, then they're ready to dig into therapy and then you give them the right insights that are warrior informed. And that's what I do now. And that is very effective and it doesn't traumatize people. So that's where I've shifted. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense, and I can't thank you enough for sharing that because I try and do that when I'm talking to people as far as you need to shift your mindset. The focusing on the bad thing over and over and over again. I mean, I've been diving into neuroplasticity and how
Yeah.
your neurons and things work.
Yep.
If you're constantly thinking about the bad thing that happened or you being a victim at some point in time, you are reinforcing and building those pathways like, oh, I'm depressed or I'm dealing with this stress or this loss. You know
Yep.
what? Acknowledge it, but let's move on. Let's take the focus somewhere else. You don't want to deny it and bury it,
Right.
but you
No, you have
want
to address
to,
it.
yes,
Right.
you have to address it. But then, all right, where am I going from this point? So you start
But you don't have
looking
to steep
forward.
in it. You don't have to bake in it for
Yes.
weeks and weeks.
Exactly. And I think that's something that people do on their own. They spiral. If you're
Yep.
struggling with the loss of a friend, maybe a relative, somebody died unexpectedly, traumatically. You keep thinking about that loss, keep thinking about that loss, keep thinking about that loss. You are not going to recover because you're focused on what you lost. If you start being able to reframe and be, how lucky was I to know that person? How grateful am I to have that person in my life? Yeah, they're not here anymore, but boy, I was blessed for this many years or to have this relationship. And when you can start shifting that and reframing, I think that's when some real healing takes place.
I agree with most of what you said. I see grief a little differently. You're talking about it in grateful that I had that relationship, kind of a past tense. One of the things I learned from working for 3 years with TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, I was the senior advisor for suicide prevention and postvention initiatives. TAPS is a very well-established, long-standing nonprofit that supports military families who have lost a loved one, and my team was specifically focused on suicide loss. And one of the things I learned from those grief experts is that we grieve because we love, and the love is carried forward with us, and the relationship doesn't end in the sense that the people who have formed us, and maybe you agree and it's just semantics, but I think navigating grief in a healthy way is about continuing the relationship in terms of knowing what that person would say to you in the future and kind of like integrating that relationship and that love and honoring that person's legacy in an active way. It's never about, to me, saying goodbye and moving on. It's about trans transmuting that relationship into one that you can carry as a light and loving burden, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. That's what I try and teach people is the reframing, so that
Yeah,
relationship is different. So they have great and it does, yes, absolutely, it does move on into the future because that
we're on the same
relationship.
page, though.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, totally on the same page. And I don't think you just, oh, lock it away and it's done and move on. But how do you
right.
move forward with the relationship? How do you move forward with your thoughts? How do
Yes, yeah,
you treat others around you now that you have that experience? How can you be a better friend, a better partner, a better
yep,
teammate, tribe member? All those things come into play. And it's an opportunity to learn and grow any
exactly.
obstacle.
Okay, we're agreed. See, I will respectfully challenge you when I hear something that I'm like, I think about it differently, and I welcome the same from you.
Absolutely, I love it. That's keeping it real, and that's what we need to do if we wanna grow. You gotta be real with people. You don't wanna be a yes man or yes woman
Yeah.
and yeah, 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 okay. No, we need to challenge things, and that's how we get stronger.
I'm
That's
glad
how
you
we
think
become
that
more
because my new
resilient.
book is not a yes, ma'am, yes, sir kind of book. It is a let's rethink everything, please, or we'll continue to bury our bravest book.
Yeah, I think the focused trauma that you talked about and explained earlier is man, that is a problem because you're just I don't see the moving forward. Maybe it does work for some people. I've not worked with, a bunch of people as a psychologist, so that's not there. I'm a coach. I talk to people and mentor people. We do some psychological things, and I do try and, be aware and cognizant of what I'm sharing and doing things. So I do research, and that's why I know about neuroplasticity. I'm not an expert, but I know about it. Those type of things. And I think working together is so important. And that's why I have you on the show. And please, listeners, hit pause, go in the description, find out about Doc Springer, what she's doing, get her new book, Fallout. You need to really dig in and dive deep on the problems that you're dealing with, or if you know somebody that's dealing with a problem, get the book for them. It's always good to give a gift, and giving forward and paying it forward always is a positive thing. And here we like to be positive, so don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. So now I want to ask you, as far as I got a question here that I wrote down because
Okay.
I think this is a good one. In your work with couples and families, what is the most common emotional gap you see between someone who serves and the people who love them?
Okay. The most common. I would say one of the most common, if not the most common, is when you marry somebody in the military, you know at some level that the mission is the priority. You know at some level that you're signing, or maybe you don't. A lot of people actually don't know. They sign up, they don't quite know what they've signed up for, and then it's a rude awakening to know that, they're going to have to move, or their spouse is going to be deployed or multiply deployed, and they didn't really have any way to know or predict that. But even if you did, even in the best case scenario, a lot of times guys will marry wives with really a warrior wife, like a that has their own like warrior spirit in a different way. And they will sometimes protect them unnecessarily from understanding a little bit more about their landscape emotionally than they should. And so they tend to think, I don't want my spouse to, you know, know the things I've seen, or, have these bad images in their brain. And so they shut themselves down entirely. And their spouse knows that they're struggling because there's love and a bond there. But they don't know really what they're struggling with. And so it creates a rift, a distance, a detachment in the relationship that isn't helpful. And so when I'm working with couples, one of the things I often find myself saying is, you don't have to give your spouse a blow by blow, like trauma focused, right? You don't have
Mhm.
to do an exposure exercise with your spouse and tell them every single thing you saw and did. And, you know, but if you cut them off from your emotional landscape, then the relationship is a short time relationship. Ultimately, you'll hit a wall and your spouse will say, you've shut me out. I don't feel connected to you anymore. I'm um, overwhelmed with anxiety because I know that you're struggling and you won't talk to me. So, learning to talk about your emotional landscape, as in, Um, I'm having memories of things that we saw in combat that have just left me feeling such helplessness or a sense of survivor guilt. What I need from you is, and whatever you need, whether it's some coverage to go and hang out with some veteran buddies, whether it's a long hug, whether it's a quiet date, just the two of you to walk and just, sit on the end of a dock, whatever it is. Learning to ask directly for what you need is the most
Mm,
important thing so that a loving and good-willed spouse can meet the need. If you cannot do that, the relationship invariably starts to have this rift. Um, And so, yeah, I would say that's one of the most common things.
So it comes down to communication, being able to communicate effectively, properly, and respectfully to your partner.
Yes, and I would actually go back to earlier in our conversation. It comes down to courage, not just communication. It's courage, and that means showing what is in your heart, and that means taking off your emotional armor with a person that you love.
What are some tools for guys like me or girls or anybody that's wearing that armor? What's a way to help make it less heavy to take off?
I think we build trust in every relationship. Even let's say if you're married, I don't know if you are, but let's say you have somebody that's the love of your life. It's really scary to open up because, no dog wants to poop in their own backyard, right? So it's like you want to like be very careful and thoughtful, right, about how you open up, and you're afraid that your partner spouse would think differently of you or see you differently, and so in every relationship, even that closest one, still, you have to take a small risk. We build trust by taking a small risk and seeing how someone handles it. And you're a coach, so you know that if you take a small risk and someone doesn't handle it very well, then you can help them. Say, here's what would be really helpful for me. A good willed, loving spouse will want to make that change. And so sometimes there's this little bit messy process, up front as people learn how to talk about things differently and learn how to best support each other. But if you never take that risk and you start kind of dropping a little bit of your emotional armor, share something that's a little bit scary, and then talk about how you support each other in that. So, in other words, like, I don't encourage people to jump all the way to like the most difficult, like, is a reason in video games you don't fight the crime boss, like in the first level. Like, you go and you progressively, take on more and more challenges. And here in relationships, it's take a little risk and then learn a better process for supporting each other and start to become soulmates. That's another thing from another book I wrote years ago that I took out of print because I want to rewrite it. But I don't think there's any such thing as soulmates the way we think of them. Like somebody's one in a million match that like otherwise all of our soulmates are in China because like by the numbers, they're all going to be there because that's where a lot of people, millions and millions of people live, right? But I do think that if you have the right insights, that you can become irreplaceable to each other, that you can become each other's one in a million match. That's something I've written about in Psychology Today. There's a lot of free blogs on Psychology Today that I've written in free range psychology around this concept. And how you do that is in part related to how you navigate difficult conversations and conflict and whether you can have the courage to approach them. And sometimes one of the things that a good doc can do is like a good doc can help you get the insights and help you summon the courage to do that and help you understand why it's worth it to do that and what the cost of not doing it may be.
Absolutely. And I really like what you did with connecting risks to trustworthiness,
Yeah.
because that is how it's built. And I really think that word taking risks can be used in my community because we're risk takers. We jump out of planes. You go into
Mhm.
combat. You're kicking a
Look,
door in that's unknown. Like we
right.
take risks. And if you can use that analogy and be like, hey, you already take all kinds of risks in life. Just take a little one. And the video game, like, yes, you don't go to the boss right away. Don't go in there and risk it all. But
Hmm.
the growth and the process, and you learn, and that will build that trust, that connection, that relationship, and that bond. So I think risking a little bit by sharing is a very powerful tool to establishing trust and a really good, solid relationship.
Another thing you can do before you do that is state your intention to take some risks and to say some things that are maybe harder to say. Ask your partner to like kind of be patient with you and maybe tell your partner how they can best support you before you take that risk. As in, I want to talk with you more openly about some stuff. And it's because I trust you and you're the love of my life. This is hard for me because I don't want you to think differently about me because you're the love of my life. And when I tell you about these things, here is what would be most helpful to me for you to just listen. I'm not looking for advice or for you to just hold me in a long hug or for you to tell me that you love me just as much and that you don't think any less of me because I opened up and shared with you. That's what I need from you. A goodwill, loving spouse will want to give that to you, will want that clarity and that direct request from you.
Yeah, I like how you also be like, this is what I need. So
Hmm.
you're not leaving it as an unknown because sometimes
Right.
we as partners, we're like, okay, my partner's struggling with this. My spouse is dealing with, what do I do? And then you start grasping at things and you're doing maybe the wrong things. So when you're able to communicate and be like, hey, this is what I need from you right now, like that long, slow hug, or hey, I need to just
Yep.
go out and talk to a few of my old teammates, or you know what, I just need to make a phone call to my buddy Joe, who I served with. Give me an hour on the phone, please. Those type
Yep.
of things, when you let the person know what you need, if they're a loving spouse, like you said, they're gonna try and meet those needs. So don't be
Yeah.
afraid to ask.
Yeah, this comes out of 10 years I spent studying close relationships and marriage that people don't really know about. So when I was in grad school, I was part of a research group that followed 200 newlywed couples over 4 years. And we watched them in the lab and they had conflict. And my first book, Marriage for Equals, was about how to establish a relationship that's um, as respectful as it is loving. So with mutual respect and love. And this comes out of just years of knowing, kind of what works in relationships, what predicts longevity and marital satisfaction. And the hallmark of secure attachment is asking directly for what you need. And I think often, actually, wives are sometimes tend to not ask even more than husbands because there's this sense of, well, if you really love me, you'd like know what I need. You'd be able to read my mind. This is like a another myth, right?
Yep.
I might write another book on relationships, but we're not mind readers, and it's better to be clear about what you need and help your partner learn how to become the soulmate you never want to leave.
That's good stuff. I wanna ask you comfort zones. People are in comfort zones all the time, or they try and stay in the comfort zone for safety. Can you get into the psychological aspect of that and why it's so important to get out of the comfort zone sometimes?
Sure. Do you wanna talk about it in the context of any specific challenge or
Just in general, like if you're a comfort zone, I don't want to leave my house maybe, or comfort zone, like I have my job, it's safety, but it's not my dream. It's not my passion, but I'm making money. I'm paying my bills, wherever you'd like to take it.
okay, that kills people with a warrior spirit, staying in your comfort zone. Part of being somebody with a warrior spirit is at some level, you yearn to be tested. You would not have answered the call if you didn't have that element in your spirit. So it is a pseudo wisdom to think that the safe path is the right path for you if you have a warrior spirit. I'm only speaking to people I know that I support. Assuming a warrior spirit and a wife any people can have a warrior spirit and not be a war fighter. Like my definition of a warrior, so I should probably give some context, is people who do what others can't or won't in the service of values they hold sacred. So it's not just about going to combat. A lot of warriors never deploy. It's not their choice. They just were never sent. Or there's people that are athletes that have a warrior spirit. There's people that are first responders who have that self sacrificial warrior spirit and they yearn to be tested. So being in your comfort zone your whole life is a path of death, not like sometimes literal death, but emotional stunting, stagnation, and death. You have to take risks to build trust. You have to take risks to know what you're capable of. You have to take risks to keep on growing. When I was at University of Florida in the Department of Psychology, this was in grad school, I was teaching undergrads, and my signature course, which also is something very few people know, was personal growth. So probably there's a lot of overlap in our philosophy, Daniel, because I was always encouraging people to grow themselves by taking risks, because that's how we build not just trust with each other, but trust with ourselves. It's so important to be able to say, I trust myself because I've been able to take on this challenge, because I've been able to pull this tribe in around me, right? Like launching a book is an act of trust, and it's not for the faint of heart. Like, there's probably always people in the teams that, like, maybe I'm hoping it's not just me, that before you go into combat, you just like puke, and then you go. I'm that way. So last night, midnight, my book goes live. I went, and I didn't induce it. It just happens. Just puke it up. Okay, now I'm going to go, because people would rather, I've heard, um, go to work in their underwear than give a long talk or sing an a cappella song, right? And writing a book where you pour your heart and soul into it and you say stuff that directly challenges the status quo and the powers that be and the foundations with money that are doing big galas. And, you know, I'm challenging the thinking that has taken us in the wrong direction for decades, because that's what I feel I need to do in my warrior spirit. But it isn't easy, and it doesn't come without cost and without, you know, overcoming fear in the path. But you still have to do it if you're going to look back and say, I had a life that was wonderful where I lived into my deepest purpose. You have to get out of your comfort zone if you want to have purpose and meaning and fulfill the potential that's there based on your warrior spirit. Is that what you were
No, that's
asking?
great. I couldn't agree more. I mean, you got to get out of your comfort zone. You need passion, you need purpose. Those are things that the human spirit and the mind thrive in. If you have a reason to get up and do something and you have a passion for it, man, that's just going to be energetic in itself compared to just, I'm going to stay here and play it safe. And I do like the way you use the warrior spirit is innately you are a risk taker, and that is getting out of your comfort zone. If you're not doing that, you're not going to sit well because you are not
Mm.
following your gut in a sense and what you
Yep.
were designed to do. I think that's fantastic. So, when did your first real transformational mindset shift happen for you to come down this path? And was there a trigger or what led you to where you are today?
Hard to pin down an exact moment, but I would say I give a lot of credit to the warriors in my life who have trained me up. I think I do have some unique gifts that I feel were God given, not something I take credit for, but I have some unique giftings, and I have an affiliation with people with the warrior spirit because I have my own variation of the warrior spirit. So when I started working with warriors, there was kind of a mutual recognition and respect that it just feels right to me when I'm working with warriors. But I think that one of those first weekends in the woods with a bunch of war fighters and then many to follow in these off the grid places, like, that was my training grounds as a doc. And those were the inflection points where I was able to see, wow, what we're doing in these other spaces, the way that I was trained and socialized is completely missing the mark for what these communities need. And the same thing is happening in public safety. I just did a talk 2 days ago to a group of public safety peer support specialists and other public safety folks. And I talked about how we have a major problem with people. There's a unfit for duty problem because,
Mm,
people look at this, all the people leaving the profession and people getting sidelined by PTSD. And the whole premise of my talk is that it's not the first responders who are unfit for duty. It's civilian psychology that's unfit for
mm,
duty. And civilian psychology is what has been advanced for many years, migrated into public safety, and it isn't what first responders need. It doesn't match the culture, value, and ethos of first responders. Those civilian approaches are not working and they won't work. And so let's kind of pause and break from these false beliefs and wrong approaches so that we can build what protectors and defenders really need. Um, so I think it was the weekends in the woods, that really in that place of like circles of warriors in grief, working through survivor guilt, moral injuries, talking honestly, like the example I gave you about their mental warfare, what the voice of their demons tell them. Only until I got into those circles and warriors started training me up did I start to see what needed to be built.
Yeah, that's powerful. Being in the woods in nature in that environment alone in itself is game changing a lot of times because it gives
Yeah.
yourself that space to think, the freedom where you're safe and you're in a non threatening environment. I tell people to go for a walk and go in the woods sometimes. That's all you need. Give yourself that space, see what's around you and take things in, and then just follow where your mind goes and be an observer of your thoughts and what you're thinking and learn from yourself. So I think that was very powerful being out there with the people and you being open and receptive with situational awareness to understand, hey, this is different and we're getting different results. So more power to you. I'm proud of you for that. Grateful for the work you do. It's incredible to talk to someone and have someone like you on the show that is actively pursuing results and willing to be flexible and change and make change. Because what is insanity? The definition, right? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We can do all the ads we want about suicide, but if it's not changing anything, let's stop doing that and do something else. So I think you're spot on. I can't wait to check out Fallout. That's something that I'm very curious about now. And I think it's important to go to the dark side a little bit to understand what
Yeah.
people are struggling with. You mentioned moral injury too. A lot of people, I think, get confused by moral injury. So, can you share moral injury, what it is, and how you try and help people get through that?
Sure. How long do we have? Um, um, isn't it
3 hour session. Let's
3 minutes
go.
to the end of the
No.
um, okay, so let me just give a quick, hopefully helpful distinction here that because a lot of people don't know this, I think. Moral injury often gets collapsed with post-traumatic stress injury or disorder. Some people think of it. I don't, but some people do. They're not the same thing. Um, I did a podcast, you may know John McCaskill, the Men Talking Mindfulness podcast. I did a whole episode on moral injury and kind of really breaking this down. So more there, but um, it's okay. So post traumatic stress is an anxiety disorder, and it has to do with believing that the world is not a safe place, or that other people can't be trusted, or that you're not safe navigating the world around you. That is very different from moral injury, which is actually about a sense of being contaminated, morally contaminated by a sense of shame, a feeling that you don't belong. And it is really about losing trust in yourself, losing, sort of, it's about how shame kind of interacts with the identity when you're morally injured. And you don't have to do something to be morally injured. I really go into this in my book Warrior, but even surviving when someone you love, like a brother or sister, died, can operate like a moral injury in the sense of when you survive and someone else dies, and then when you hit a time of struggle, let's say you transition out of the military, a lot of people struggle in that wasteland. You kind of go back in your mind and say, well, that person died and they never would have struggled like I am. They wouldn't be drinking and, imperiling their marriage and yelling at their kid. And um, who am I to live when such a worthy person died? And so you sort of like compare yourself to the ghost of the person you lost, and it can create a moral injury that can be kind of, ongoing. And so the two are very different things. And a succinct answer to your question is I do not believe one on one support for moral injury is the most powerful thing. I think it's better when people like myself facilitate the tribe, a group of warriors to come together and facilitate that healing in a group based process because shame is a communal emotion and healing it is a communal process. And a group that has the moral authority to dissolve shame is, in my experience, the most powerful way to address moral injury rather than meeting with a one on one kind of therapist and doing some kind of protocol, in my observation.
No, great. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you so much for being and spending time here with the asset mindset community and all my teammates out there that are listening. I'd like to ask you to leave one more thought. What's the message, quick elevator pitch, or whatever it is you want to share about your message and what you're doing you want the listeners to hear?
I'd like to ask the warrior community to stand with me. I summon my courage to write my latest book, Fallout, and it's a call to those of you with a warrior spirit to break from false beliefs that are killing people in this community and move with purpose towards what works. I think if you read it, you will hopefully resonate with most of what I've written, I hope, because it's derived from years of work with warriors and first responders. The most helpful way for people to support this is to buy a copy or buy a few copies. That's a vote of support. The only way that Amazon registers this book needs to be visible to people that need it. So it's not ever going to be expensive. The print copy is $12. Nobody makes money from books. But they are a great way to scale impact and change and save lives. So if people can buy some copies and ask their friends to do the same, send a text. People don't look at social media too much these days. I think we're all overwhelmed. But if you send a direct text to people that will read your text and say, hey, this new book came out. Let's support Doc Springer. She's speaking on behalf of us. Let's have her back. That's what I need right now. I'm asking directly for what I need. I'm securely attached to this tribe.
Wonderful. I love it. Everybody out there, you heard it here. You need to get out there and support people that are in your tribe, that are around you, and that people are doing good things. Support them and do a good thing like this. Share. Give a gift of a book, maybe Fallout, to someone you think needs it. So please always remember you're not alone. The struggle is real for everybody. And most of all, don't forget, own your power.